Have you ever heard of a seal who lives in the sea, but when the spirit takes them, can shed its skin and dance and sing on land? Selkies are the hidden gems of the fairy folk. They're what you might call a feel-good fairy, and we have long been charmed by their playful, affectionate and loyal character. I have an incredible true Selkie story for you today, which was sent to me by a viewer from the US. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Selkies. The Selkie, or Silkie for the Scottish, live in the waters of Scotland and Ireland and Iceland too. Those places that seem to be the quiet corners of the world. The Selkie has the appearance of a seal, but just like the fairy I'm going to feature in next week's video, no spoilers, this fairy can live in water and on land. You see, it is long believed that the Selkie can shed its outer skin to reveal a human-like body beneath. From time to time, when no humans are around, Selkie like to climb up on the rocks, remove their seal skin, and bask their milky white skin under the warmth of the sun. And under the light of the moon, they are known to dance on their land legs and sing sweet-tempered songs in groups of half a dozen or more. Imagine what a sight that would be. Well, sightings of Selkie around the coast and the islands of Scotland are not uncommon. I'd like to take you now to a pristine beach cove in the north of Scotland one quiet September dawn, as Blair shares this extraordinary personal experience. Around 10 years ago, I'd been working in the UK, and during a break, I decided to go on a short tour of the north of Scotland. I'd stayed overnight at Durness, which is a wonderful little village with some amazingly rustic buildings, and I decided to head out early the next morning for some sightseeing. Well, this was in September, and the weather had been much nicer than I'd expected, with most days being warm, although overcast, and there was little of the rain that I'd feared. On my drive, I happened to arrive at a roadside beach and selected this spot for a walk as the sun was about to rise. Well, I parked on the side of the road in the pre-dawn light, and after a few minutes sitting in the car, I set out walking towards the beach. I remember the sound of the waves and the smell of the ocean were lovely in the cool morning air. I walked around 200 yards towards the rocks on the left of the beach and realised that I could hear the soft sound of laughter, singing, and playful shouts coming from further around the rocks. Well, this was a little confusing, as I thought I'd be alone at this hour of the morning, and I didn't see any houses close to the spot. I also felt a little uneasy about it for some reason, which wasn't obvious at the time. I was told that the beaches around here were open to the public, and there were many walking trails, so I felt confident that I was not encroaching on a private gathering. But as I grew closer, I was sure the voices were mostly, if not all, female. I, perhaps naively, doubted that I was in any danger, as I'm a fairly large man. My only concern was that I might scare the people, yet despite this, I really wanted to see around the rocks and discover who had gathered there so early on the beach. Strangely, as I drew closer to the large rock outcrop that barred my view of the group around the cove, the sound of their activity quieted to almost no noise at all. The only sound were the waves, the wind, and some splashing or frolicking in the water. A few seconds later, I cleared the rocks and I finally had a view of the small beach. To my confusion, I saw that there were no people on the sand. The only company that greeted me were some 15 or so grey seals of various sizes. Most of them were watching me from the safety of the water, while others were swimming further out into the bay. While they were a lovely sight to behold in the early morning light, I was more curious at the time as to the location of the people who'd been there. I stood and looked about the small cove area, and I saw no people or evidence that people had been there. Well, I decided to walk into the area, and I sat down on the rocks to watch the sunrise over the ocean. As I relaxed there, the seals swam away, and I was left to my own thoughts. It was maybe half an hour later that, in the light of the sun, I noticed the fresh footprints in the sand all around me. It was the ones in front of me I examined first. They were smaller than my own feet, so I believed that they were from a young woman. But there were many prints around, some quite small, obviously children, and none appeared to be as large as my own footprints. The prints all appeared to come up from the water and return to the water, but the waves were quickly destroying the evidence of this passing. I thought about it, and I'm not sure what I saw. I admit it was still a little dark when I looked at the seals, yet I am sure that they weren't people. They were quite large and grey, with no human hair or faces. Yet I couldn't explain this. I started to feel a sense of unease, and I decided it would be better to just get up and get on with my day. So I quickly put it behind me and just continued on with my day tour. But that night, when I returned to my lodgings, I mentioned my morning adventure to the landlady. She drew quiet on my questions about the disappearing people and advised me not to talk to people about my experience. She told me that I had encountered a group of Selkies, and that I should count myself lucky that no misfortune had occurred to me. Well, since then, I've always kept my experience a secret, only now telling you about it, as I trust I will not be mocked. I often wonder why I stopped at that beach, and whether I sensed their presence, or if it was just a coincidence. Thanks so much to Blair for sharing his experience with the enlightened folk here at Fairy Encounters. I have more viewer personal experiences lined up to share with you, so keep an eye out for those in the coming weeks. And if you have a personal sighting or encounter that you'd like to share, you can email me too. My address is in the notes below, and I'd love to hear from you. We're left with a lingering question, aren't we? What are Selkie? They physically resemble seals, but are not seals. As with all fairies, we're left somewhat scratching our heads, figuring out what they are or how they do what they do. Are these ancient creatures, having evolved over thousands of years? As always, we must keep an open mind when it comes to fairies. Now, 2 things before you go. Thanks for sharing your time with me. I'm so glad you're here. And please take a sec just to check that you're subscribed and have dinged that notifications bell. It really helps me, and it makes me so happy to see subscribers growing on my channel. Until next time, stay curious and be kind. Cheerio!